best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is why it hasn't been stopped.
You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with Associate Editor and columnist at the Financial Times, Stephen Bush, and political commentator and former advisor to Theresa May, Kirsty Buchanan. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, The Guardian quotes President Trump warning of a big price to pay if Venezuela does not comply with American demands. The Financial Times reports the White House is retaining the option of using further armed force as it mounts pressure on Caracas. The Metro pictures Nicolas Maduro giving the thumbs up ahead of his appearance in court, which is expected on Monday. The Daily Telegraph focuses on America's renewed interest in taking over Greenland following the military operation in Venezuela. The Mail leads on criticism of Sir Keir Starmer by some MPs who feel he should have condemned the US attack on Venezuela. The Daily Star features boxer Anthony Joshua's tribute to his two friends who were killed in a car crash in Nigeria. The Sun's also leading on Anthony Joshua and his pledge to support the families of the deceased. The Eye says the Prime Minister is plotting a course for a softer Brexit as leadership rivals circle. And a similar headline from The Express saying there are fears Keir Starmer is plotting a full-blown Brexit betrayal. And the Mirror leads on the singer Jessie Nelson as she reveals her twin daughters have been diagnosed with a severe genetic condition, which means they may never gain the ability to walk. We are joined tonight by Stephen and Kirsty to take us through the papers. Welcome to you both. Let's start with the front page of the Financial Times and the headline there, Trump piles pressure, fresh pressure on Venezuela. Obviously, the story developing, and we've had the utterings from President Trump regarding the Vice President, and that if she does as she's told, essentially, then things should go her way.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the thing about what we've seen is we know that the American military is the most impressive fighting force that the world has ever seen, and it can pull off operations of the kind we've seen. But what we also know is the ability of any country to effectively try and govern a country remotely, which seems to be what Trump is suggesting, as we detail in our story, which is this idea that, well, the vice president, now the acting president of Venezuela, will do what she's told remotely, and the US will retain the optionality to try and enforce its will through kind of distant attacks that are safe for US personnel. But because I think this is going to be the big question in terms of this intervention we've seen is what the US is trying to do is quite, to put it generously, ambitious, and another way of putting it is quite mad, in that it is, you know, if you want to run a country, you do sort of have to be in the country, and this kind of idea that you can sort of intervene without intervening directly, I think is, well, it's going to be very difficult for them.
Although President Trump hasn't ruled out boots on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a huge step away from his usual approach. In his first term, he hugely increased the amount of bombing the United States was doing, but it was, delivery from the air. Putting troops on the ground would, in some ways, be a big repudiation of one of his most popular positions in the United States, which is his opposition to these, as he calls them, forever wars that his predecessors had launched.
And Kirsty, what can we read into the public utterances of Delcy Rodriguez, the interim president? Because she's been saying to the Venezuelans that Maduro is the only rightful leader, but we hear from President Trump that she has been in conversations with Marco Rubio, suggesting that she will cooperate.
It's interesting, isn't it? The rhetoric from Rodriguez is very strong and very condemnatory of American actions, but clearly at the moment she is the kind of chosen person, if you like, from from the Trump administration to take on. I think one of the potential strategic mistakes that they might have made in attempting to subcontract out their takeover, if you like, of the country is why they didn't look to the effective real president of Venezuela, who was elected in 2024, Gonzalez, for his return. Now, that would have been much more popular with the Venezuelans than simply moving from one presumably hated member of the Maduro regime to another, the vice president, effectively the interim president. I think the other potential strategic mistake here is if she does toe the line and does be, increasingly be seen by the rest of the Maduro regime as the effective puppet of Trump, what might that then do? There are, the defence minister, the interior minister. There's a power around that kind of vacant Maduro throne, if you like. And I think if she becomes a puppet of Trump, I worry that potentially you might end up with a kind of a power struggle within that existing regime to topple her, and then we might get into a very difficult scenario in Venezuela. So far, so calm, but I think it's fraught with all kinds of dangers going forward.
Yes, and the idea that there might be a power vacuum is the big question, isn't it? I mean, we've already had reports out of Venezuela that there has been fighting on the streets and that some elements are being armed by the government. So, I mean, it does look as if there is going to be further, trouble in the country.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is ultimately you can't partially topple a dictatorship, right? Then, if you essentially you have in Venezuela a government that does not have popular legitimacy, then it is widely accepted, lost the last set of elections, but keeps control partly because it controls the apparatus of the security state. This vision that the Trump White House seems to have, which isn't you have a more moderate member of that security state in charge. Well, she obviously isn't going to command popular support among the ordinary Venezuelan on the street. She also equally obviously isn't going to command popular support within the regime. That is inherently going to be unstable. And of course, the other question here is, as we report the end of this story, and we'll obviously get onto this in a bit, is Trump's eye now going to turn to other parts of the region, whether it's Cuba or to other parts of the Americas like Greenland, or is he going to, remember when he was talking about annexing Canada? Maybe that's going to come back up to the top of his in tray. And I think the real question is, as I say, we know that the US is capable of this type of rapid and radical military success, but where its interventions have foundered is when you have now you've won, how are you going to run this? Because the US has been reluctant to act as a proper empire, as it were, and it's tried to outsource it, and that often hasn't worked.
And the scale of Venezuela makes it, considerably more difficult a challenge than... I mean, the analogy that's always been, that's been used over the last day or so is around the replacement of Noriega in Panama. Panama is a much, much smaller country than Venezuela. There's something like a population of 30 million people. And the colectivos, the kind of paramilitary wing of the Maduro regime, has been keeping the peace, has been out on the streets today, effectively saying to the Venezuelan people, do not come out, do not show popular support for the legitimate government, if you like, in exile. And so actually the Venezuelans have been keeping their head down. Yes, they've been hitting the shops to make sure that they've got enough food in, because uncertainty creates this kind of...
And getting money out of the banks
and getting money out creates this kind of run on the banks and in the supermarkets, stocking up on food and what have you. But, it just feels at the moment like, the regime around, Delcy is described as a pragmatist, but it's not pragmatism that's the issue here. You either stand with the Maduro regime or you're a Trump puppet. It's very hard to see how pragmatism will get you through the next few months in that vein.
And also the Venezuelans' very uncertain future, because we know that Donald Trump also said that there's the possibility they could strike again. And we turn to The Guardian and we know that 15,000-strong force is still in the Caribbean and could, make fresh military interventions. Stephen?
Yeah, and this is the big question is, will there be more? We know quite a few Venezuelans died in the initial attack. It creates this atmosphere of fear and uncertainty. And, of course, it creates uncertainty throughout the region because, of course, it's not the only opponent of the US in the region. So, yeah, it means, everyone in the hemisphere is as a result going to be on high alert. And it kind of also creates a situation where if you're in Caracas, if you're in the Maduro regime, it's not like you can pick up the phone and go, hey, tell us what you want to do. Because from their perspective, they were negotiating with the United States last week before this happened. So there's also this uncertainty of whether or not they can please Trump. So, yeah, I mean, it's a deeply uncertain and chaotic situation.
And coming back to the point you mentioned previously, Stephen, about, where does the US's land grab stop? And The Guardian, and I think The Telegraph as well, mentioning that the president says, quoted here, "We do need Greenland, absolutely." That's in an interview he gave to The Atlantic. Kirsty.
Yes, indeed. And much of this has been... The framework around the removal of Maduro was around it being a law enforcement action. In effect, he's the kind of head of a narco cartel, and they're enacting an indictment from 2020. The reality is, it is going to be seen as access to oil, and in a similar vein, they have attempted in the past to access Greenland. They've offered to buy Greenland, in effect, from underneath. It's a sort of semi-autonomous territory of Denmark at the moment, and they've offered to pay the 57,000 people that live in Greenland more than they get paid in subsidy from Denmark. And the 57,000 people in Greenland have said, no, thank you. We want independence from Denmark. We don't want to be sold out to the United States. But in a similar vein, the US isn't after Greenland because it likes polar bears and snow. It's after Greenland for the rare earth minerals. And what you could see is them attempting to shore up through their kind of sphere of influence in the Western powers, not just the kind of security presence, but also their ability to stand and shore themselves up against China and against Russia in terms of access to rare earth minerals, into fossil fuels, so that they're not beholden to China or Russia going forward in those kind of emerging technologies of the future, as well as the fossil fuels of the past.
The Prime Minister of Greenland saying it's disrespectful, saying that the territory's for sale, and referring to an image posted on social media by Katie Miller, the wife of Mr Trump's Deputy Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller, showing the map of Greenland painted with the US flag and captioned "soon."
Yeah, and look, the big picture of this story for all of us here in the United Kingdom is that ultimately what happens in Venezuela is, should concern us because we should be concerned about the future of all humanity. But it is of particular concern to us what happens in Greenland because it is is part of a European neighbour, and of course, and it's a NATO country. And what is the central aim of the government's foreign policy towards the US? It is to make sure that they do not walk away from the Ukraine conflict and hand Vladimir Putin a victory he has not been able to achieve on the battlefield through effectively forcing a negotiated settlement on his terms. Now, if you have a situation where Denmark cannot persuade the United States that not to take Greenland from it, then I'm afraid that the prospect that the United Kingdom or France or the EU can persuade the Trump White House to stay the course on Ukraine looks very, very bleak indeed. And that is going to have huge implications for all of us here in Europe, all of us here in the United Kingdom. This is, obviously, the Venezuela story is a huge story for the world, but actually this Greenland story is a much, much bigger story, I think, for all of us here in the United Kingdom.
OK, Stephen and Kirsty, thank you very much for the moment. We're going to take a break. Coming up, as leadership rivals circle, Starmer plots the course for a softer Brexit. We'll be back to discuss that.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Big Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
We've come to one of Moscow's Cold War bunkers. It was built as a top-secret command centre.
Being here really feels like you're stepping back in time. I'm Ivor Bennett, Sky's Moscow correspondent.
a show of military might and menace.
Courage, bravery and sacrifice will win the day.
It's a new subject. They'll learn about combat drones and some how to handle a Kalashnikov.
The Kremlin continues to put forward its own version of events, both present and past.
There's no mention of the fact that Russia invaded its neighbour. That's rewriting history, isn't it?
Now we have to read it carefully.
Vladimir Putin put forward his plan for a ceasefire in Ukraine, telling Kiev, pull out of your eastern territories and the war will end. Why should the West trust you?
Frankly, I don't care whether the West trusts us or not.
Vladimir Putin is already the Kremlin's longest-serving leader since Stalin. The question is, what will a fifth Putin term mean for Russia and the world?
Why do you support Vladimir Putin, Mr. Segal?
I can't answer questions that stupid.
I've watched Vladimir Putin attempt to create a new world order.
The St. Petersburg Economic Forum was the backdrop to Vladimir Putin's latest verbal volley that Russia could send missiles to other nations to target the West.
Ambassador, I wonder, shall we have a quick word for Sky News?
Is the West right? Are you fueling Russia's war machine?
Swedish media, oh my God, you're not afraid of being here.
American journalist Evan Gershkovich is on trial here, but was first on display.
Russia says Evan Gershkovich was caught red-handed, but has never produced any evidence to back that up. Sky News. Get the full story first.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think?
It's really unusual.
Mornings with Richard and Frost. Let's crack on. Let's get started.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan has the right to respond.
You're like, what?
A historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
You are watching the press preview, still with me, Stephen Bush and Kirsty Buchanan. Let's take a look at the I front page, and we read that Sir Keir Starmer is plotting a course for a softer Brexit, and this coming as leadership rivals are circling. Stephen.
Well, yes, so Keir Starmer, to mark the start of the new year, did an interview with the BBC this morning in which he said that the UK should move even closer to the EU. Now, the important thing to note here is he also then ruled out essentially all of the things which would actually get a closer relationship with the EU. He ruled out the return of free movement, and he's ruled out abandoning our ability to strike our own trade deals. And if you're not willing to do either of those things, at that point you are only able to move a very, very small amount to the towards the EU. But the big picture political thing here is that the overwhelming majority, not just of Labour voters, but of Lib Dem and Green voters, who are obviously part of the sort of the bloc of voters that the Labour Party needs to unify again if it's to be re-elected, now think Brexit was a mistake. That is now a majority opinion in the country. It's, of course, always been a majority opinion within the Labour Party. And because Keir Starmer's now so weak internally, Keir's never really been one of the biggest pro-Europeans in the party. He was a fairly opportunistic and late convert to the second referendum cause when he was shadow Brexit secretary. But because he's in such a weak position, the more vocal pro-Europeans feel able to go, OK, maybe we should get a bit closer. And this is going to be the subplot of Starmer's remaining time as Prime Minister, will be this drumbeat of we should get closer to the EU. This is the number one lever we can pull for growth. It will be a big theme in the leadership contest to replace him, which maybe this year, maybe next year, maybe as late as 2028, but is going to happen at some point before the next election.
Do you think because he has sort of been weakened and there are these rivals circling that he will be pushed to go for a closer alignment with the EU?
I think it's hard to see how it can get pushed much further because it's a manifesto commitment for Labour not to rejoin the single market or the customs union. That doesn't rule out joining a customs union, but as he made clear today in the interview, if you joined a customs union, that then hampers your ability to have free trade deals with other countries, and as this government's made quite a lot of the ones that it's managed to secure. So I think going forward, he's going to try and hold on to that argument that you can do sector-by-sector deals, and I think he'll be moving towards a kind of professional cross-accreditation for things like lawyers and architects to be able to move backwards and forwards. We recently saw Erasmus being revived at considerable cost to the taxpayer. I think the problem is, as Steve says, it becomes a kind of drumbeat because he doesn't have the power or the ability to shut it down. And you even have people in the cabinet. This is what I find most extraordinary about this. David Lammy has come out and said, "Oh, we really should join a customs union." It's one thing for the kind of backbenchers to rumble about it. It's a whole different ballgame for the cabinet to be so disrespectful of kind of collective cabinet responsibility, the manifesto, and their prime minister to kind of openly talk about this. And the problem that he's got, as is so often, in the position that you're in, when you build this kind of broad consensus where it's not built on a particular ideology, is to try and hold a path like this. You're going to get pushed from the soft left to say, look, you're not going far enough, and from the right of the party, and from, you try to tack away from losing votes to reform as well, they're going to say this is Brexit betrayal. And this has always been the problem. If you build a kind of broad coalition, a consensus coalition, which is, a mile wide and an inch deep, you lose people on both sides in your ability to try and navigate in this kind of middle way. Will it hold? I think you're probably right. I think it'll just get pushed more and more and more towards a next election, at least, where a customs union is probably back on the table again.
But the Daily Express front page, just very quickly, they are saying that he's moving to that full-blown Brexit betrayal.
Yeah, I mean, and this is, of course, the flip side of that, which is that this means we will now have had 2 elections in which we had the illusory promise and we would stop talking about Brexit, which, of course, we never will. Geography is geography, right? They're always going to... it's like a divorce where you don't move out of your house, right? You're obviously going to still have to keep talking to your ex afterwards. But the flip side of this, and this is what will worry Labour MPs in that third of seats where they have a majority of Leave voters, is, look, it's great to repolarise on Remain Leave lines if you are a Labour MP who's looking at a poll where you go, OK, I lose my seat, but the vote splits among the left. But it's a risk to you if you're facing that threat from reform. OK, Stephen and Kirsty, thank you so much for taking us through the papers. We'll see you in the 11. Let's take a look at the weather for you now.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
Well, the cold weather continues into next week as strong northerly winds bring Arctic air and a range of wintry hazards. There are multiple weather warnings in force, with amber snow warnings across northern Scotland.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us? Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office. Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.